Hey everyone, today we are going to be trying to figure out who the richest character in the game is. Let's first start off this list with two characters who are definitely wealthy, but it's kinda hard to tell just about how wealthy due to the time periods that they come from. Plague is the high priestess in the ancient city of Babylon, making her the seemingly highest ranking religious person when it comes to Babylon. This means she is presumably relatively wealthy. This can also be seen through her fine clothing and intricate metalwork for her headdress and censer. I read up on it, but unfortunately I could not find any definitive number, nor any way to really get a good idea of the exact amount of her possible net worth, as it were. However, due to her high standing role, devotion to the people, and the fact that she's covered in gold, she was likely pretty wealthy. We could presume, as Kazan has the entire Yamaoka estate, that his family and his earnings are higher than that of the average samurai. So the real wealth for Kazan is going to come from the Yamaoka estate itself. It's stated in the lore that the estate was bought by the first of the Yamaoka, a shipwrecked survivor who came from a distant ashy land. He washed ashore just as political tension sparked the flames of war. Yamaoka joined the battle and unleashed hell on his foes. No one could match the raw fury of his katana, which elevated him to a legend. His fame grew as he spilled blood on both sides of the conflict. With power came wealth, which he used to buy the estate and begin his legacy. So, although the Yamaokas fall off a bit in the current day, we know that back when Kazan owned the estate, that it was worth a lot. I tried to find similar sized properties to the estate in Kagawa, Japan, where the estate is said to be, but I couldn't really find anything. I further tried to search for different Japanese clans who were wealthy around the Edo period, and I couldn't find any distinct numbers. It seems, however, that many were high ranking in society and owned large amounts of land, which lines up with what we see Kazan having in game and in the lore. Starting off properly with three characters who I think would have earned relatively the same amount, we have Yui, Feng, and Doctor. Yui from her successful life as a motorcyclist, Feng from her success of being a professional esports player and streamer, and Doctor for being a high esteemed and so high paid medical professional, if you really want to call him that. Feng is said to be a relatively successful esports player in her prime, becoming somewhat renowned within the gaming community for her skill. As esports profits kinda comes down to mostly winning, which Feng doesn't seem to do much of, I think she probably earns around $50,000 a year from her esports career, with this likely doubling to about $100,000 due to her live streams that she stated to do, which for many esports players is actually a bigger earner than attending events and such and receiving payouts from prize pools. This also makes sense as seemingly after she has a losing streak and stops competing, she seems perfectly able to support herself financially. I'm gonna say around $120,000 yearly. Yui is stated to be a successful motorcyclist who wins multiple tournaments and earns enough to further support her group, the Sakura 7. From figures I could find about how much professional motorcyclists make, and specifically in Japan, I got around the $100,000 figure, and as she's successful and actually wins a decent amount, I think this could feasibly be doubled to about $200,000 a year. Again, due to her ability to support the ever-growing Sakura 7 group, this also makes sense. As a high-ranking and highly qualified doctor working for the CIA, Doctor is supposedly earning a substantial amount, especially as in the lore he appears to spearhead his own research and practically get free reign over Larry's Memorial Institute. Doctors in the CIA today apparently make around $100,000 to $150,000 a year. As DBD's Doctor, again though, is seemingly answering to himself, we can probably bump this up a bit higher, especially as he's working in the secret MKUltra project section. By researching into electroshock therapy. Also, as Doctor has probably been working for multiple decades, we can assume that he is most likely a millionaire and made multiple hundreds of thousands a year. Blight could possibly be at a similar level, however later in his lore he appears to go off the rails as he tries to break into alternate dimensions, so I don't think he has much stashed away. Let's say Doctor makes $200,000 a year, and in terms of net worth is likely a millionaire. I think Ace has likely made a bunch in his lifetime, likely into multiple millions, but he spent it all or lost it all due to gambling and dodgy dealing. It's stated in his lore that he gambled, scammed, seduced, and smooth-talked his way to a life of luxury as a high roller in the land of opportunity. Despite money always having a way of slipping through his fingers, Ace always figured he could win more. He never fulfilled that ambition. Eventually he racked up too many debts with the wrong kind of people, and when they finally came to collect, Ace was nowhere to be found. So it seems he was on a constant upwards and then immediate downward trend when it came to how much he was making. Possibly at some point though, he did have somewhere into the millions. So I think it's worth noting. David's lore opens with, the single child of a wealthy family, David King seemed destined for greatness. While growing up in Manchester, he demonstrated serious potential in both sports and academics, and with his family connections, all doors were open to him. He could have succeeded at anything if it weren't for his combative nature. Further stating after his rugby career fails that money was no issue, so he took it as an early retirement and focused on other fun things to do. Basically, David's true wealth is really just a big question mark, but from what it seems, his parents or family are definitely millionaires, as he's probably in his 20s, yet he seems to think that he can easily retire on their wealth. Presuming he's going to live a minimum of 40 to 50 more years, this means his family will need around $3 million to allow him to retire in his early 20s, which is around the amount he would need to live comfortably. With this in mind, I would think David, or I guess his family more so, are worth definitely into the tens of hundreds of millions, as David is from Manchester, and the richest families in Manchester span from around $100 million to $10 billion. We can probably say David's family, with their stated connections that opened all doors, are likely in this range. I'm going to put them at $100 million, assuming his family are the owners of a successful business and remain as majority shareholders. But if we go simply off that retirement figure of $3 million, which David seems sure he will be entitled to, I think we get a more reasonable number of $3 million for David's possible net worth, not including the money he would not yet receive from his family, who sound to be alive and well. Yun-Jin is a producer for the successful K-pop boy band No Spin, as well as later the producer of Ji-Woon and his solo act The Trickster. There is likely a ton of money in this. If we compare Yun-Jin's earnings to a real-world producer of a K-pop boy band, we can have a pretty good idea. When making the All Kill chapter, Behavior consulted with Kevin Wu, a K-pop artist and also a K-pop producer, notably of BTS. There's actually a whole video focusing on Kevin Wu's inputs into the DLC, so if we base Yun-Jin's earnings as No Spin's producer on the net worth of BTS's producer, we get about a $3 million figure. In Yun-Jin's lore, it's also mentioned that she has a luxury penthouse in Seoul. The average Seoul luxury apartment was worth about $2 million, so I think $3 million is about right. Élodie and Felix were children of a wealthy group named the Imperiati, who seemingly own a private island, named Dyer Island off the coast of India. So I decided to do a little island shopping. What I found is that there's quite a few islands that are surprisingly cheap. However, we know that Dyer Island is relatively large due to the abandoned internment camp on it and other structures that it's later mentioned Felix plans to restore. In terms of islands, I found one off the coast of Dubai worth $20 million. I found another off the coast of Thailand for $150 million. These were the two closest I could find to the location and the island size, that were also for sale. So we can probably presume that the island is worth about $85 million. However, as the Imperiati seem to own the island as a collective, and Felix and Élodie are children of these people, we can presume that at most they would likely inherit about 10% of the island, which would be about $8.5 million each, so we can use that as a basis for both Élodie and Felix. Élodie is stated to be born into a lush Parisian household in a comfortable home. We can presume that this house is in Paris's 13 arrondissement, which is mentioned later on into her lore. This area is mentioned to be eccentric and have a substantial library. We can presume that this is the National Library of France. I couldn't find any properties within Paris's 13 arrondissement, but I found one for about $40 million in the 7th, which is fairly nearby, as well as a few others in the 16th for about $10 million each. I lean more towards Élodie living in these as it's stated to be a household, whereas most of the places in the 7th and 13th were apartments. I'm going to say about $10 million. It's not very clear what her parents did for a living, but we can presume if they can afford this kind of thing, we can round her net worth up to about $25 million, as obviously her parents are taken and she's going to inherit all this stuff. However, as Élodie is said to go around the world trying to find out what happened to her parents, seemingly not earning anything herself, that she's basically burning into her inheritance. She does this for 14 years too, so I'm going to knock her down by about $5 million to a total of $20 million. Ji-Woon is a K-pop star and presumably quite wealthy because of it, being part of a popular boy band No Spin and then moving on to his solo act The Trickster. There's no definitive number we can get just from looking at Ji-Woon's lore, so I want to suggest we compare him to similar real-world K-pop stars, more specifically members of BTS, which seemed to give Behavior some inspiration, again based on the fact that Behavior actually got one of BTS's producers to inform them on their K-pop DLC, when it came to the design elements. So this leads me to believe that The Trickster is worth about $20 million based on this. Felix's lore states his parents, both members of an ancient society, were always out of the Richter Manor at medical conferences or providing humanitarian aid around the world. Traveling exposed young Felix to new cultures, languages, and architecture unlike anything he had ever seen before. So building on that baseline number of 8.5 million from his island share, we can estimate the Richter mana price. When searching in Coburg, Germany, I found the prices range from around $2.5 million to $4.5 million, so let's place it at $3.5 million, bringing him up to $12 million. It then states that over the years, Felix proved to be an exceptional architect. He established his firm with his colleague Lauren Golder. Both shared a similar vision and were philosophically opposed to formulaic modernist buildings, often experimenting with unusual materials, shapes, and structures. Finally, his law mentioning old friends of his father commissioned his firm Richter and Golder to build something new and unconventional on Dyer Island. This challenge excited and terrified Felix, who now drowned his anxieties with articles and books on parenting. Felix is also stated in his law to win both the Swiss Architect Medal and German National Design Award, which are both real, when he's just 23. Winners of the Swiss Architect Medal were worth anywhere between about $3 million to about $50 million for the past decade or so of winners, and the German National Design Award winners for 2013, which is the year it seems Felix won in DVD's canon, is about $5 million. As he's about 30 in his law though, I think it's fair to place him around the $20 million mark when it comes to the value of his work as an architect and his architectural company, Richter and Golder, leading me to believe Felix is worth about $32 million. Jane is a talk show host and is seemingly pretty known, at least throughout the US. It's stated in her law that she has lines of beauty and fashion products also on top of her talk show and also previous acting and performance roles. She also has a published book and has appeared on the covers of different magazines. Looking at any US talk show host, you'll find some ridiculously high numbers for the amount they earn or their total net worth. According to the DBD Wiki, Jane is based on Oprah Winfrey, meaning we can probably draw some kind of comparison between these two people. Oprah is worth $2.7 billion currently. However, as Jane is much earlier in her career, I don't think she's quite at this level yet. There is quite a sizable disparity for talk show hosts when it comes to how much they make, but it's anywhere between $10 million to the billions when it comes to their net worth. I think with Jane's own show, appearance on magazines, book publishing, and lines of fashion and beauty products, despite being relatively early in her career, I'm saying she's got a net worth of about $100 million. As the sole heir to the MacMillan wealth, due to being the only remaining living relative of Archie MacMillan, Evan, prior to getting taken by the entity, is likely fairly wealthy, stated in the law to be heir to a great fortune. The main form of Evan's wealth will come from the MacMillan estate's land and also the industries of coal mining and also the ironworks. We also know that the MacMillans have hundreds of workers, as hundreds are killed in the mining disaster. Around the 1920s, when the Trappers Law is set, mining or coal mining would have been a very profitable industry. We also know that the town of Weeks, where the estate resides, houses lots of jealous other wealthy people, meaning the MacMillans must be substantially wealthy. From what I can tell, the coal mining industry in the US in 1918 was worth about $20 billion, with Washington State, where Trapper resides, producing around 230,000 tons of coal, according to a Department of Conservation and Development report on coal and coal mining in 1942. In 1915, a closer figure to the peak of the MacMillan estate, it stated coal mining in Washington made around $700,000, which today is around $18.6 million. We can break this number down by 7 for the 7 counties this report mentions, to be around $2.65 million. Presuming the MacMillans are the biggest producers in their county, we can put this to be about $2 million every year. Taking this and assuming the mines have been functioning since around 1890 to 1940, this puts the total revenue of the mines at $100 million. The largest coal mine in Washington State was sold in 2001 for around $100 million. So assuming Evan inherits both the land and the profits from the mine, we can presume he is worth around $200 million, likely more due to the added numbers from the ironworks and simply the expanse of land that is the MacMillan estate. Hillbilly's main wealth comes from his parents' farm, Coldwind, which is incredibly large, houses multiple buildings and tons of machinery, as well as huge fields worth of crops. We can presume, as Billy is inspired by Bubba Sawyer, that Coldwind resides in Texas. The 10 current largest ranches in Texas are at lowest 255,000 acres and at largest 825,000 acres, with each acre currently being worth around $3,000 in Texas. If we put Coldwind right down the middle at around 525,000 acres, this makes the total land worth $1.5 billion. This doesn't include the complete contents of the farm itself, just the land. With the countless amounts of produce on there, particularly corn, as well as the hundreds of animals that Billy is said to slaughter, we can assume that the farm aside its land is worth much more than this. However, as the law states that the farm spans 2 counties, and the higher end of these and the larger ranches in Texas spans 6 counties, we can divide the amount of land by about 3 or so. So the 3 biggest that spans 6 counties are between 535,000 to 825,000 acres, so about 680,000 on average, average, divided by 3, and this is about 226,600 acres, which would make Coldwind worth about 680 million. This to me still seems way over just because of how run down Coldwind seems, but then again I guess this is because it is literally run down and abandoned. However, there are things that sway me somewhat on this number. On the farm we can see multiple combine harvesters, which today can be valued anywhere between $300,000 to $500,000 each. The fact there's multiple of these actually makes me believe it more that this farm is working to the extent of thousands of acres of land, and what we see in game is just a tiny portion of what may be extensive amounts of land, with tons of crops and animals also. As Billy kills both of his parents, he is technically the sole inheritor of their wealth, and so is probably worth about $700 million. Now, Jake is a weird one because he could realistically be at the very bottom of this list, earning absolutely nothing and have nothing of value in his possession, or he could potentially be the highest on this list if we presume he is to inherit the wealth of his parents. However, as he seems to have a bad relationship with his father and only a distant one with his mother, it's debatable whether he would have even inherited his parents' wealth. It's more likely that his Yale-educated brother would inherit most of it, his brother seemingly embracing a richer lifestyle where Jake rejects it. But hey, if Jake were to inherit this wealth, we can say he would get half, split between himself and his brother. But what would this wealth amount to? Jake's law mentions that he is the son of a wealthy CEO, further stating that he is heir to wealth, noble manners, and caretakers of the family reputation and legacy. It's also mentioned he has fine dining and maids. We then get mention of something pretty interesting in the line, no Wi-Fi, no Fortune 500 companies, no father or mother. This suggests that he is the son of a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. A Fortune 500 company is a company that is in the top 500 total revenues for a US company within a fiscal year. From what I found, the average CEOs of companies within the Fortune 500 bracket made upwards of $10 million a year, with the higher end of this being closer to $100 million, or nearer to $600 million if you're Elon Musk. This means that Jake's parents are likely at a minimum making multiple hundreds of millions per year as CEOs, also presuming they have other investments also. I think it's highly possible with salary, landowning, investments and more that the lifestyle described in Jake's law means his parents are probably billionaires, based on my presumption that Jake is from Connecticut, and based on the wealthiest families in Connecticut, I presume his parents are worth around $1.5 billion, making him the heir to about $750 million, split with his brother. That's the lower end too, with the higher end being a near $10 billion inheritance. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and please do drop any corrections or additions down below. Thanks, and goodbye.